The 8th of June, 793. A small island off the northeast coast of England. The tide is out. On the rocks stands a monastery. Its bells, its candles, its gold. For 150 years, the monks of Lindisfarne have lived here in peace, copying scripture by hand, tending the shrine of a saint. They have no walls. They have no soldiers. They have never needed them. Out on the water, something is coming that no one here has a word for yet. The monks would have seen the ships before they understood them. Long, low, impossibly fast, driven by sail and by oar, built to cross open ocean and still slide right up onto a beach. By the time anyone on that island grasped what was happening, it was already too late. The scholar Alcuin, writing soon after, struggled to even describe it. Never before, he wrote, had such terror appeared in Britain. We tend to remember this moment as the beginning of the Viking Age, the first great raid, the day the long ships came. But a raid is just a robbery. The raiders took the gold, killed or enslaved the monks, and sailed back north into the grey. The real story isn't how the Vikings robbed England, it's how they did something no one thought possible. How a scattered people from across the sea, with no empire, no capital, no single king, came not just to raid this land, but to rule it, to put one of their own on the English throne. This is the story of how it happened. Over 200 years, 3 generations, and a handful of moments where the whole future of England balanced on a knife's edge. It begins with a weakness the raiders couldn't yet see, but they would. In the year 793, there was no such place as England. There was a patchwork, rival kingdoms that spent as much energy fighting each other as defending their coasts. Northumbria in the north, Mercia in the heart of the country, East Anglia in the east, Wessex in the south, 4 crowns, 4 armies, no unity, and a coastline dotted with monasteries, the banks of their age, stuffed with silver and gold, sitting in the open, guarded by nothing but the faith that no one would dare. For decades, the pattern held. The ships would come in summer, strike a monastery, a town, a market, and vanish before any army could gather. Hit, loot, leave. The Anglo-Saxon kingdoms couldn't catch what they couldn't predict. And then, one year, the ships didn't leave. The raiders began to stay through the winter, camped on English soil, living off English land. The summer robbery was becoming something else, something permanent. The probe had found the weakness. Now came the plan. In the year 865, something arrived on England's shores that the island had never seen. Not a raiding party, an army. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle gave it a name that says everything about how it was feared. The Great Heathen Army. A coalition of warriors drawn from across Scandinavia, united under shared command and carrying a single ambition that set them apart from every raider before them. They had not come for silver, they had come for land, for kingdoms. According to legend, the army was led by the sons of a near mythical Viking, Ragnar Lodbrok, among them a commander remembered as Ivar the Boneless. The sagas say they came to avenge their father, supposedly thrown to his death in a pit of snakes by a Northumbrian king. How much of that is true, we genuinely don't know. Ragnar may never have existed as one man, and the snake pit belongs to saga, not to record. But the army was real. Its leaders were real. And what they did next is written into the map of England to this day. They struck north first, into Northumbria, a kingdom already tearing itself apart in civil war. In 866, they took its greatest city, York. The 2 rival Northumbrian kings stopped fighting each other just long enough to try to take it back together. They failed. Both died, and the Norse sagas claim one of them, King Ella, was executed by a ritual so gruesome it has haunted the Viking legend ever since. The so-called Blood Eagle. Almost certainly it never happened. The story likely grew from a poet's misread line, centuries after the fact. But its staying power tells you something about the sheer terror these men inspired. Northumbria, one of the 4 kingdoms, was gone. Then East Anglia. Its King Edmund stood against them and was killed for it in 869. The bare fact of his death is history. the vivid legend that grew around it. Edmund bound to a tree, shot through with arrows, beheaded, his severed head guarded in the woods by a wolf, came later, written by those who made him a saint. 2 kingdoms down. Then Mercia, the great power of the Midlands, buckled and broke. 3 of the 4 English kingdoms, conquered, occupied, or paying for their survival. By the late 870s, only 1 kingdom still stood free, and it stood almost alone. In January 878, the Vikings under their leader Guthrum did to Wessex what they had done everywhere else, a sudden brutal winter strike on the royal stronghold at Chippenham. They nearly ended it all in a single night. The King of Wessex escaped with a handful of men into the swamps of Somerset. No throne, no army, no kingdom to speak of, just marshland, and the cold, and the very real possibility that England, all of it, was about to become Viking land. His name was Alfred, and what he did next is the reason we still remember him as the only English king ever called the Great. From a fort in the marshes at Athelney, Alfred did not run. He waited. He sent out riders in secret, and across the spring of 878, the men of Wessex, the ones who hadn't fled or surrendered, began to slip out of the countryside to find him. In May, he called them all together at a great stone and marched. Somewhere near Eddington in Wiltshire, the last free army of England met the Great Heathen Army in open battle. Alfred's men locked their shields into a single unbroken wall and held. His own biographer wrote that the king overthrew the pagans with great slaughter and chased the survivors all the way back to their fortress. He besieged them there for 2 weeks, starving, beaten, with no way out. The Vikings did something they had never done on such terms before. They surrendered, and Alfred's price was extraordinary. Not just peace, conversion. The Viking king Guthrum was baptized a Christian, with Alfred himself standing as his godfather. The terror of the north made to kneel in a church. The 2 sides carved the country in half. Alfred kept the south and west. The Vikings kept the north and east, a vast region living under Norse custom and Norse law. It even kept the name, the Dane law, the land under Danish law. And here, you might think, the story ends. The underdog king saved his people. The Vikings were stopped. England survived. But it doesn't end here. Because the conquest the Great Heathen Army began was not finished. It was only paused, and a century later it would come back, and this time it would succeed completely. By the year 1000, a new and weaker king sat on the English throne, Ethelred, remembered by the cruel nickname, the Unready. His answer to the returning Vikings was not to fight them, but to pay them. Vast tributes of silver, handed over to make them go away. It never worked. Each payment only proved how rich and how frightened England was, and the sums spiraled into the tens of thousands of pounds of silver again and again. England was buying its own conquest, 1 payment at a time. The Danish king Sweyn Forkbeard came not for silver now, but for the crown itself, and very nearly took it. When he died, his son finished what generations of Vikings had started. In 1016, after years of war, a Viking was crowned king of all England. His name was Cnut, and the longships that had first appeared off Lindisfarne 223 years earlier had finally, completely won. But here is the strange truth at the heart of it. The man who completed the Viking conquest of England did not rule as a savage. Cnut ruled as a Christian king, a lawmaker, a pilgrim to Rome, at the center of a great empire spanning the North Sea, binding England, Denmark, and Norway under a single crown. And that empire was never only about the sword. The same people the chronicles called heathen butchers were, at the very same time, among the greatest travelers the world had ever seen. Their ships reached the markets of Constantinople and the silver of Baghdad in the east, and in the west, 500 years before Columbus, they stepped onto the shores of North America. We remember the terror because the people who could write it down were the people they terrified. The monks, the chroniclers, the ones who watched the sails appear and reached for the only words they had. But the raiders who came that June morning to rob a single church on a tide-washed island did not, in the end, just take its gold. They took the whole kingdom, and they wore its crown, from a raid to a reign. In a little over 2 centuries, the longships didn't just change England's history, they became it.